Fort Larned, established on the western Kansas Prairie, was built for the protection of U.S. mail coaches, commercial trade, and other traffic along the bustling Santa Fe Trail. This important military post was a ground for war and peace with the surrounding native tribes throughout the 1860s and 70s. The walls of this fort also played host to the first African-American military regiments, known proudly as the Buffalo Soldiers. Join me as I explore the living history of this well-preserved frontier fort and learn how the soldiers and their families lived and dined during the mid-1800s. And all this for a taste of history.
The end of the Mexican-American War in 1848 brought on a period of great change for the United States and its newly acquired Southwest territories. With international borders now a thing of the past, commercial freighting and trade along the Santa Fe Trail increased dramatically. By the 1860s, a torrent of travelers and developing U.S. government policies inflicted strict boundaries on the native tribes of the Southern Plains. With each pioneer settlement forcing large groups of Indians to relocate, native resistance to the wagons traveling the trail increased and lone parties were attacked. In response to increased hostility, the United States military constructed Fort Larned in 1859 at the junction of the Pawnee Creek and the Arkansas River in Kansas. Throughout Fort Larned's duration, the soldiers' primary purpose was to protect Santa Fe Trail commerce and escort U.S. mail coaches and military supply wagons on the trail. Throughout the Indian Wars, of which Fort Larned was at the center of, this military post also served as the headquarters for the Bureau of Indian Affairs, tasked with carrying out government treaty obligations and distributing annuities in return for keeping the peace. Throughout the late 1800s, the railroad pushed west through central Kansas, and soldiers from Fort Larned provided protection for its construction workers. With its more economical and efficient shipping, the dusty wagon roads of the Santa Fe Trail began being replaced. By 1878, the railroad had completely transformed the West, and Fort Larned was abandoned. Today, the fort stands as one of the most well-preserved military strongholds of its era and gives travelers a glimpse into the life of an everyday soldier and traveler.
Good afternoon, Chef. I am Bob Rogers, and I'm going to be demonstrating Frontier Army cooking here at Fort Larned.
I understand that being a cook in the Army in those days wasn't just simple because it wasn't about passion, it was assignment.
It was an assignment. The Army had no permanent cooks, and so they took a soldier from the company ranks and he cooked for 10 days. At the end of that 10-day period, another soldier would be assigned and he would cook for 10 days, and then another guy would relieve him. All the reading I've done, nobody starves in the Indian Wars Army, but nobody writes home and says, gee, Mom, this is really good food. But it was there to nourish the soldier, provide calories, energy, and if it tasted good, very good. If not, well, they ate it or starved. We're doing mashed peas with salted pork. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the peas and put them in this piece of scrap cloth. Now the recipe calls for dried peas. We have some nice carrots here, and we're going to add them to the peas. Now these carrots came out of the company garden, and one of the soldiers' job was to grow their food. The War Department was very, very cheap. And so the idea is if the soldiers could grow the food, more power to them, and the soldiers would make a garden.
So the good news about peas is the natural vegetable protein too. So it's relatively healthy.
That's exactly right. Nutrition, calories, energy. Okay, so what we're going to do is my assistant here, Dustin, is going to tie this up into a little bag, and we're going to drop it into a kettle and boil it for 2 hours. If I pour the peas directly in, I have to stir them continuously and they scald.
Like that.
Modern people would probably use a double boiler.
Yeah.
This we don't. You have that one cook and maybe an assistant cooking for 75 or 100 guys. He doesn't have time to continually stir. And what I have here, Chef, is salt pork. Slightly different than salt pork today. It was shipped in giant wooden casks in brine. If you look at a lot of salt pork recipes of the time, they don't mention adding salt because the salt's here. It has this gray color. A lot of the soldiers, when they first ate this, they were kind of put off by it. A different smell.
Well, it's a pickling effect, yeah.
Yeah. And so my assistant is going to slice it up in bite-sized cuts, and then we're going to wrap that too.
Talking about this recipe makes me hungry.
And again, we're going to put this into a bag
Same thing.
or a piece of cloth and wrap it up, and we're going to boil this for several hours to boil out as much of the salt, and the preservative as we can.
So I don't see any fancy bay leaf or other stuff to be used in this. It's straightforward.
The Army bought spices. They were very, very basic. Interesting thing, they used Lee and Perrin's steak sauce. Yeah, and so there's a lot of accounts of that. So we're going to let this boil for about 2 hours or simmer, and then it will be ready to eat.
At the conclusion of the Civil War, the United States Army created new regiments composed solely of African American soldiers, the 24th and 25th Infantry and the 9th and 10th Cavalry. Because of the lack of social and economic opportunities for black men after the war, many jumped at the chance for a career in the U.S. Army.
Here at Fort Larned, in 1867, just right after they were organized at Fort Leavenworth, Company A of the 10th United States Cavalry was assigned here. These were regular Army soldiers, just like the white infantry. They received the same pay, uniforms, the same weapons, the same gear that the 7th United States Cavalry was being organized with too. But there was a lot of discrimination that took place here at Fort Larned. Some of the infantry officers, for example, would refuse to allow their men to give the black soldiers the dignity of watching them perform on the parade ground.
Fort Larned, when we was there, we'd go out on patrol and we would help the settlers move westward, protect the settlers. They wanted us to protect them, but they didn't want us too close. Not everybody wanted blacks to be in the military.
As a cavalry unit at a frontier military post, the men of Company A went on reconnaissance patrols, escorted mail wagons along the Santa Fe Trail, and took their turn at guard duty on the post. Captain Nicholas Nolan noted the company's devotion to duty, hard work, and eagerness to prove themselves in the field. But it was perhaps the Native Americans who garnered the most appreciation towards the 10th Cavalry, giving them their reputable nickname, the Buffalo Soldiers.
The Plains Indians were very spiritual people, just like the black soldier is. They thought God had sent the buffalo down as their brother, who cared for them. Food, water, shelter, weapons, clothing, housing. There's not one part of the buffalo that the Plains Indians didn't use. They said that the black man's hair on the black man's head looked very much like that of the hair on the hump of the buffalo. They said our skin looked very much like the fur of the buffalo. And as we got into the fighting spirit and we got into combat with them, they said our fighting spirit was very much like a wounded buffalo. We would not die. So they started calling us Buffalo Soldiers. That's the first time in history that we've ever been called anything out of great respect and great pride. We wear that very proudly.
So our next step in the recipe is we're going to lightly fry some onions, and when we open the bag of pork, we will just drop the onions on top of the pork. Nothing fancy. So our soldiers plucked this from the ground, and we're going to slice it and fry it in lard or schmaltz. There's no vegetable oil, there is no olive oil, and lard is what you fry in if you're in the frontier west.
Butter was scarce at the time because you used the cream for everything else but making butter.
That's right.
Except if you over-whip the cream. Bob, that's why I'm so excited to see that. It's a complete different approach to cooking as I'm used to, which is nice to see it. And you got an assistant that actually listens to you.
He does. Well, he's in the frontier army. If he does it, he goes to stand in the sweat box for a few hours, so yes.
So he doesn't have a choice.
Now we have removed that iron circular piece just to get a quick heat.
Yeah.
Frizzle the onions, I think one recipe called.
Yeah, because I think when you do it like that, you want the flavor of the onion still be dominant, you know?
Yes.
I get it. I'll show you an easy trick, okay.
I nominate you to be the cook for the next 10 days.
I wouldn't mind. I'm just not so sure that they would ever let me leave again.
That's true.
Here you go. Your onions are ready to go. Look at perfect.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Next, we're going to take our pork and our peas off the fire. We have simmered these for about 2 hours approximately.
All right.
So we have our pork.
All right.
And we're going to throw the water out, or we could reserve it for tomorrow's breakfast. Take a look at that.
Take a look at that. Never mind, take a look at it. Take a piece of it. Oh, man. And I can see now why we made the onions translucent. Because it's going to be perfect on top.
We've added the pork back into its pot and mix it up.
I need to get a piece with the onion.
Those 3 forkfuls were the army ration for pork, so you can't have any more after that.
You're kidding. But you know what? It could use a little bit more pepper, in my opinion.
Okay.
It's good though. Beautiful.
Now the recipe says to smash the peas.
Look at that.
Oh, that smells heavenly.
And if it was me, if I would be in charge of the kitchen today, obviously you know what I would do. No pepper and some schmaltz right underneath there.
Add?
Yeah. Oh, good. It might not be in your recipe book, but it's in ours today.
More lard is always good.
Hey, after all, I had to come down and show a little bit of my experience with you guys.
I'm glad to learn from you. So we're going to relocate to the tables out here. I'm ready for the soldiers.
How do you like the food?
Chef, welcome to Fort Larned and welcome to the Post Bakery. I'm Wayne and I'm the Post Baker here.
And I tell you, I can't wait to see your craft because it's, to me, a very important part. I happen to like bread, as you can tell, but knowing the location that you were in those days, you couldn't just run down the street or have a truck to
No,
drop off
we had
some
to
bread.
have the flour was shipped in from St. Louis and we had to have all of the supplies here in the commissary. Post Baker would have an assistant baker and a couple others that would help out in the bakery and bring over the water, the wood, keep the fire stoked in the oven.
And you got a beautiful oven behind you there. I find that's a beauty.
Each soldier would have a ration of a loaf of bread for every day. So 300 loaves of bread every day would have to be baked.
And it was 7 days a
It was
week.
busy, 7 days a week. Didn't get any off days.
How many breads can you bake in one shot?
I've been told 320, but I wouldn't want to try and bake 320 loaves in there at one time.
Let's do a couple of them right now, right?
We'll do a couple.
All right.
We're going to start with 4 cups of water, 2 tablespoons of yeast. And then to that, we're going to add 4 cups of flour. And mix it up, get the lumps out. Then we'll leave it sit for about an hour. It starts the yeast
Yeah,
activating.
correct. You've done it a few times, I can tell, though.
There we go.
Yeah. An hour or so, it looks like,
It looks like that one.
voila, magic.
And you can see it's bubbling.
Yeah, it's beautiful, beautiful yeast smell to it.
Add another 5 cups of water. And we'll also add at this time 2 tablespoons of salt. For this recipe, for the 8 loaves, it takes about 5 pounds of flour. You can see I wouldn't want to stick my hands in there yet. So you get it to the consistency to where you can actually knead it.
If your arm gets tired, I can whisk it for you for a while.
Would you do that?
Sure, come on. You don't think I've ever done that before, did you? You're gonna need more flour here.
More flour.
Yeah. You need some good, strong arms for that. If you make enough for 320. So Wayne, I mean, we're just doing 1 loaf. Just imagine doing that times how many times it is for 320. So you'd have to use the big trough
That's
behind
right.
you.
Use the
working
big
it.
dough trough back
Yeah, yeah.
here to be able to do that. It would take some strong arms to mix up the dough in there, though.
Yeah, you're almost there.
Now's the time to get your fingers dirty.
Yeah. And then once it's needed, how long you let it
Then
until it rises?
sits for about another hour.
If it's warm in here, which it is, obviously,
It is, with the oven,
with the
yeah.
oven, so it's perfect. Otherwise, you won't get a reaction to it.
We'll cut it into loaves
Yeah.
and put it in the bread pan.
In the bread pan.
And then it'll sit for another hour. Yeah,
So you let it rise in the bread pan.
yeah.
Do you put any kind of shortening in the bread pan at all, or nothing?
We'll put some lard.
Lard?
If we have lard, we'll put some lard in the bread pan.
I see
Brush
right
it
up
in
there.
there.
Old Dominion lard oil. There you go. Brush it on the bottom,
Brush it on the bottom, and then we'll brush the top
the
of the
top
loaf
as well.
with lard as well.
In the hierarchy of the fort, who would have been your boss?
The sergeant.
Sergeant?
I am assigned to here from the barracks,
Uh-huh.
and it could be for 30 days, it could be for up to 4 months, depending upon the number of soldiers that are here.
And so somebody just showed you how to make it, and then here you go.
If I was lucky, I had somebody to show me how to make it. Okay, now we'll try and cut this into,
8.
and they're not all going to be even. In 1860s, we would use the scales and try and
Yeah.
weigh them at an 18-ounce loaf.
Now it's going to rise again.
Yep.
1 hour now. And again, it's got to be warm in here for it to rise. For the yeast to be active, because without yeast, then you couldn't eat it. It would be like a stone.
And then we'll brush the top with lard as well. Baking time would be 35 to 45 minutes, about 350, 400 degrees. This is indirect heat, so the firebox is alongside the oven, and you stoke the firebox, and then it goes right into the oven core itself.
And that's why it takes quite some time for the heat to be right in there. So
Yeah, you don't just turn a dial.
that's what I'm saying.
Should be about ready now, 35, 45 minutes.
Let's go check it out. Oh, God, they look beautiful. Man, you don't have to worry ever to go back to the infantry or someplace.
Now you can see it's not even heat in there.
That's what I see.
There's some burnt parts there. Even if it's burnt, we had to use a rasp, scrape off the burnt part, and the soldiers would still eat the bread.
Well,
Now you can't eat fresh bread here. Surgeon General of the Army says no fresh bread for 24 to 48 hours. It has to sit on the shelves for 24 to 48 hours. They were afraid the yeast would impact the soldier's digestive tract.
well, guess what? He's not here. He's not here, so I'm going to Oh man, yes, some good bread. I can't believe you let it sit now for a day and a half. Beautiful. What's missing is a cold beer. So Wayne, I want to thank you because you did a spectacular job. If you see the Surgeon General, tell him I got some words for him.
For the officers, they tried to make their life here at Fort Larned very similar to the way it would have been on the east. Captains or a major, they're a little bit higher up, they usually had very nice things. If you go into an officer's quarters, it's almost like going into a home back east.
This is such a spectacular space of the fort. It's unbelievable. So Chen, so what is your role here? What do you interpret?
Well, my role here is representing a mother-in-law. And we have evidence that the officer came out here with his wife and his mother-in-law. And with the amount of entertaining that was done on the fort by the officers' wives, I am helping out my daughter by doing some baking for a coffee morning that she's having for the other wives.
So I can understand why an officer would bring the mother-in-law, because with the rotating cooks, you never know what you're going to get.
That is
So
right.
having you here, obviously, there'll be a taste of home.
Yes, that is right.
Short of if you couldn't find the ingredients, then you got to improvise.
And often the officers' wives had to improvise. Their eggs, milk were in short supply on the frontier. There are accounts of an officer's wife bringing chickens with her. And if there wasn't an officer's wife at the fort who had done this, then you have to try and buy eggs. Now, can you buy them from a nearby settler? Maybe yes, maybe no.
So eggs and bacon would have not been an average situation.
No, it would not have been. Fresh fruit also would have been very short supply. The pie that I'm making today is a peach custard pie. Whip the eggs. Add in the sugar. Should be good. Now the flour, so that it mixes better in with the eggs, I'm putting a little bit of the milk in there, and I'll try and stir it around first, because I do not want to have lumps in the custard. So we will put that into the egg mixture. And then we'll mix that together and add the rest of the milk. And then we'll take the vanilla extract, 1 teaspoon. And that is the custard made. I have already made the pastry crust ready to receive the peaches. And pour it over the peaches.
So in a modern oven, what temperature would you bake it in?
350 in a modern
Modern
oven.
oven.
And now we will take this over to the wood stove. We will be placing this in a moderate oven, and it bakes in 30 minutes to an hour.
Depending on the fire and the heat.
Yeah, when I made it at home, it took an hour. It
Yeah.
took 30 minutes yesterday. You like peach pie? You'd like to try?
Let me try your creation. I mean, I'm very familiar with this recipe. What I didn't realize is how difficult the time you had getting eggs out here.
Most people don't. Most people get the idea of the West from from the movies, but it wasn't that way.
Wow.
Do you like it?
Do I like it? I think it's fantastic. Has a great flavor to it. And again, but you know what I really like? The simplicity of it. Custard base, a little bit of flowers and the vanilla.
Yes.
It holds it together nicely.
It does, yes. And it would be a nice pie that could be served at a morning coffee, or it could be served with an afternoon tea or with a meal.
I had a great time today, and my thanks to the volunteers, because without you, we would not be able to keep history alive. And all this for a taste of history.